Well, good evening, y'all, and I hope everyone is having a very wonderful Thursday night or morning, depending on what part of the country y'all are on. Welcome to yet another wonderful episode of Mason Dixon Podcast with your host, Vinny Balducci. Remember, y'all, the views and opinions expressed here on Mason Dixon Podcast and on MAD are our own and just our own views, and they do not represent the views and opinions of any other person, group, or organization. Remember that stars help us put up statues, so for those of y'all that want to send us some stars, click that stars button down below. Another great way of helping out is clicking that share button down below. It goes a long way, y'all. So I remember about a week ago, I wanted to do kind of an overview of attending the Sons of Confederate Veterans reunion that was in Charleston, South Carolina. There was a wonderful convention. It was a lot of great events, and they did a really good job talking about the local history. So I put together a slideshow with some of the slides, and I figured that, you know what, there's a lot of slides from the Confederate Museum at Market Hall. So I figured at some point I'll do a whole separate episode on that, because that is one place that if nowhere else, if any of y'all are going to Charleston for one day and you can only see one museum, go to the Confederate Museum at Market Hall. It is the best museum. The United Daughters of the Confederacy does a fantastic job at running the museum. They have all these wonderful artifacts. They talk about the true history that gets hidden, and it's a great time there. And, you know, all the items have such significance. A lot, like I'd say 99% of them are original. You know, they came from veterans themselves. They came from their families. I also want to pay tribute to Mrs. June Wells, who really did so much for that museum. She passed away in March of 2021, but she played a pivotal role in saving that museum when the museum was hit by Hurricane Hugo. So here are the slides I put together so y'all can see and enjoy. So right here, we have, I just want to thank all of our cast here at Monuments Across Dixie that was able to attend. We only had, I think, 2 members, Jude and John. It was just so wonderful to have them and hang out with them, go to the ball. I am truly thankful for these gentlemen. We had a great time at the Confederate Ball. And I always joked, because if we see all 3 of us right here, Mr. John, he's always well-dressed. You have a Southern Baptist minister. You have me, that's your traditional, or untraditional, I should say, modern Confederate. I kind of threw together my uniform. And then my buddy Jude, who has like a Great Gatsby theme going. That's my my friend, Miss Vonda. She was from the OCR. She came out to the one event. It was the Rose Greenhow dinner, and it was great to see her. There's one of the flags from South Carolina, which I figured would be fitting. That is the one of the first secession flags, and that is the flag of the Secession Camp 4. My buddy Rebel Road Dog. So Road Dog is from North Carolina. He is a true fighter, Vietnam veteran, really proud of our history, and he does a lot with his wife, Miss Carolyn, to preserve our history. And the gentleman to the right of me, I see him every single reunion. That is Uncle Greg. So Uncle Greg is a really talented author. He writes books. He's a very talented illustrator. And he went through some stuff on his journey. And, you know, his book, which is called I Get High Watching Paint Dry, which I'll be doing a review of at some point, is a really raw look at his experience. And, you know, he went through the 1960s. He joined, I think, the Black Panther Party. Then he left the Black Panther Party. He wrote about that. And he wrote about his journey, kind of figuring out, you know, what he likes and how he really got involved in preserving our history and being an author. And he is so darn funny. Oh my gosh. When you hang out with him, he's like, I swear, he could be H.K. Edgerton's brother. Them two have the same sense of humor. They both are just a breath of fresh air. Chatting with them, I could spend just hours. So it was great to see his work and how he's just grown as an author and illustrator. My buddy, Miss Gail, she is so darn wonderful, from the Florida OCR. We had the tea together at the tea event and Victorian program on Victorian fashion that my friend Miss Cindy and her UDC chapter put together for everybody. Miss Gale again at the Confederate Ball. And Mr. Jesse, aka General Lee, is the #1 General Lee reenactor. He brings General Lee to life, and he has got a really cool story about how his mother had actually danced with Confederate soldiers. So, growing up in Virginia, she got to know the Confederate soldiers, and, he carries on all that wonderful history and, brings it to life with his stories. We had a very nice breakfast together. We had a great time hanging out and, getting to listen to all of his stories growing up in Virginia and about preserving our heritage. And of course, the second national flag, y'all, because that was the last flag that flew at Charleston Harbor. Speaking of Fort Sumter, so Fort Sumter, right, beautiful place. I will say this though, y'all, if any of y'all go to Fort Sumter, be warned, the museum is incredibly woke and they leave out a lot of good historical information. They were claiming that Missouri never seceded. And, I had friends that were there from Missouri and they were like, yeah, no, Missouri did secede. So it was one of those things where the museum did not do a good job at all. But outside, they had some nice cannons. They had a lot of cool landscape. And it's pretty cool to see, what Fort Sumter looks like today. The fort was getting shelled consistently during the war between the states. And the fact that it's still there, has endured so much, is impressive. We thought, there was a flagpole, and we were like, you know what? We want to raise this wonderful battle flag up the flagpole. And they made it definitely tamper-proof. We couldn't get it. We needed a ladder to get up to it anyway, too. So unfortunately, we did not get to raise a battle flag, but I did bring my flag around, and I had it, wrapped around me. So everybody knew that we were definitely, proud of our heritage there. And we had a wonderful private tour of Fort Sumter by a real historian. And he gave us, the Confederate side of things and what it was like, and a lot of cool stories that happened there, and how essentially the fact that the South maintained the fort for so long was pretty darn impressive. And people love the flag. I will tell you that. People were saying, can I get a photo with you? Can I get a photo with the flag? And it was so wonderful. And we had a dinner on the cruise going back. So I will say that if anybody does the boat tour to go to, Fort Sumter, know that you do want to eat your food on top of the boat, because there is a lot of turbulence, the waves and all that, and the whole boat was shaking. So the fact that the barbecue and all the food that was on the table managed to survive the boat ride without going everywhere was impressive. So we had a pretty good time, touring it, learning about the history. We had a historical program going to Fort Sumter as well as going back, and it was great to do some networking. And my buddy, Mr. Rich, who is fantastic, he is, I think, the former commander of Secession Camp 4, and I think the former South Carolina Division commander. We had a great conversation there. He put on an absolute great event, and what they did was they shot fireworks as the cruise boat was going back in honor of our Confederate ancestors. And I thought that was wonderful. They also have the Pinckney Castle, which is an island that the Sons of Confederate Veterans owns and operates, and it is much more colorful. They have a gigantic second national flag flowing in the wind, and it is a must-see stop when traveling the waters of Charleston Harbor. Right here, that is the last flag that flew over Fort Sumter, and the wonderful group, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, have that in their museum in at Market Hall, which is right in Charleston, pretty darn central to everything. The museum is open a few days a week. They have a wonderful gift shop, and originally that building, it was made as a dance hall. So a lot of the veterans would go there. They would go for dances, and typically when you were during, after the war, you would have these balls, and the balls were held for different reasons. Sometimes it was made to, raise money. And we know this building had survived the war. It survived the horrors of Reconstruction. And South Carolina pretty much kicked out those Federals like other Southern states. They did what they had to do to get the Federals out, and thus ending Reconstruction 1.0. In some ways, we are in Reconstruction 2.0. And the Federals went running home. So after that happened, the South was still pretty much war-torn. They needed to rebuild, build back better, make Dixie great again. And the women played a big role in that. And what happened was the women would get together and they had this building that was given to them. And they told all the Confederate soldiers, come and bring an item to the building. Bring anything that you want to bring that's significant. And what they did was they, over time, accumulated a humongous collection. Their first ball that was in this building, I think they got a majority of their collection of items, everything from flags to jackets to you name it. And it's all on this beautiful building. And the cool thing is underneath the building, if you go underneath it, there's actually a market where people sell stuff, and it's pretty darn cool. So people sell items such as the palmetto rose. That's a very big symbolic item in South Carolina. They were given to the men by the women of the South, roses made out of palmetto leaves. And it was a way of essentially telling them, not only showing affection, but really wishing that they would come home safe and sound. And a lot of misconception about Market Hall. And, you do have some of the CRT leftover stuff that's there, but thankfully, Charleston is now under a conservative mayor for the first time. Things are looking a lot better. They're starting to have real history being taught, and prayers that Calhoun gets put back up there. He was one of the original statesmen, a true conservative for his time, and somebody that I think a lot of us, conservatives can definitely look up to, and Southerners, because Calhoun was really big on statesmanship, something that we've got to get back to. And one of the cool things about that Market Hall is the South has always been integrated. And this is something that so many people just tend to forget, where up north was always segregated for the most part. So Market Hall, you had, whether it was white, native, or even black people that were free, that were selling whatever they wanted to sell, items and goods. So Charleston, like most of the South, was integrated. Now, there was somebody that was falsely claiming that they would sell slaves at Market Hall. That is not true at all, y'all. And there's a lot of good information, not just in this museum, but all around Charleston that explains that and some of the misconceptions that people have about Market Hall, which thankfully the myths about Market Hall have died down. And I figured we'd take the time to also appreciate some art, because this is something that I absolutely love. This portrait, if you look at this portrait, it kind of has what looks like a tree, and there's a moon, and the second national, although it could be a third national, but I'm pretty sure it's a second, flying in the wind. And there was this print was in the Confederate veteran, and this is the original painting that this came from. So the painting right here is just so beautiful. And when you look at how it almost glows, the portrait does not do it justice. In person, it had such a great gleam to it. And it's pretty cool when you see just the motion and the detailing and all that. That was one of the items where there was 3 big items there that I was like, you know what? If I had to pick an item to take home that I would absolutely love, I would be torn between those. And the painting was one of them. The life-size portrait of General Beauregard was the other one, which I have a picture somewhere of. But that portrait of General Beauregard was in the not Charleston. It was in the South Carolina Capitol. And Miss Wells had noticed that. And she was, if anyone knew Miss June Wells, she was this very nice petite lady. She was probably, 110 pounds soaking wet. But she was a fighter, small, full of life and energy. And she did not stop fighting for our heritage until the day she passed on. And she was always quiet, but a true Southern lady. And she advocated and she fought and she got possession of that Beauregard's portrait. And you'll always have members of South Carolina government that would come in there, honor the portrait, honor Beauregard, get to see the items in the museum, and all of the wonderful history that is here in South Carolina. And on the left, this is an original Third National flag. And, it's so admirable. Look at the detailing in that. It's almost perfect symmetry. I mean, for, a time when people didn't have, printing presses and things like that, they knew how to make flags. And that is such a wonderful art. And it looks like it's made out of some sort of silk. And that branch that the flag is on is original. that was carried into battle by a gentleman, I believe, in Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. And the story about it was on those 2 little note cards. And the Third National has always been my favorite Confederate flag because it is the unreconstructed flag, the flag that was never surrendered. A lot of people always go, well, why, did Fort Sumter never have a Third National? Well, the Third National was only issued, before the end of the war between the states. And therefore, not many people knew of its existence. So that is also why it was called the flag that was never surrendered. It was never officially decommissioned either. And that right there is another Third National flag. And you could see just the detail that was in these original flags. Some of the flags were very delicate. They used finer materials like silk. The women usually made the flags for the gentlemen. So, when women were holding down the home front while the men were away at war, they would work together to essentially do charity runs. They would surrender some of their dresses, even their wedding dresses. They would work to either dye the fabric or put the fabric together from different pieces of cloth and just come together to do that, repair old flags, and really, be the backbone of what the men needed for the war. That's me at Market Hall. And what I love about Market Hall is they have a beautiful First National flag that's flying out front. And it is so darn cool because there was a whole group of women from, I think, Utah or Nevada. I think it was Nevada. Sorry, no, it was Oklahoma they were from. They took a giant photo in front of the First National. Everybody probably thinks that's Betsy Ross. And it's hilarious because, you could have the First National and 9 times out of 10, nobody's going to know what it is. It's always good because you can actually, trick some people into flying the Confederate flag without realizing it. I've done that to a few people that were very woke and they had no idea what they were flying for a few years. And it was great to go out there and just experience the history, know that our colors are still flying high and proud in Charleston, South Carolina. I went down one street with some of the historic homes and I saw 2 more First Nationals. I saw 3 Third Nationals and I saw several Confederate battle flags flying from people's homes. So it was pretty cool to know that Charleston is still decently unreconstructed. And that right there is another flag that was flown during the war. They used to sell replicas of that flag at the Sons of Confederate Veterans gift shop. If we go on, this is another great piece of Confederate artwork right there. And that was one of the portraits that was in the museum. And, I like the coloration of that one, how they really went for a deeper background. It was a little bit darker. It kind of has that shaded in look. And it's really iconic, that print, because I've seen that before for t-shirt designs. And this was made, a lot of these prints after the war between the states. You had Southern artists, you had artists that wanted to just study the South and appreciate the wonderful culture that it had. And the Confederate Veteran magazine did a great job at spreading, the truth, really going on about, what we're doing for our heritage back then. And the momentum is still around today. We've never stopped fighting. As the proud descendant of a Confederate soldier, I am proud to continue the legacy and just lead the charge. So it's just so empowering to see these wonderful symbols that have always stood for freedom. Then I got a chance to go to the Battery. So the Battery is this wonderful place near the Charleston Harbor, and they call it a battery because they put up this wall for the, the waves, for hurricane protection. And all across the Battery, they have wonderful statues. And all of these memorials, all tell a story about Charleston. They have some from the colonial era and Revolutionary War. And as you walk down, it's almost like you're walking through, history. Because when you come to the end, you go to the Second Revolution or the War of Northern Aggression. And this is the defenders of the Battery. This wonderful memorial, again, made possible by the Daughters of the Confederacy, stands there guarding Charleston, South Carolina. Every Sunday in Charleston, my bud, Mr. Braxton Spivey, and Mr. Walter, and I call them the Charleston Flaggers, they go out there, they go flagging at the Battery, they keep the colors flying, and people absolutely love it. Tourists love it. There was a wonderful couple from New Jersey that took my photograph there, and they were absolutely proud to see the flag was still flying. Got a lot of claps, a lot of honks and thumbs up when I was walking with my battle flag. So it was nice to step away from, the reunion that was going on because, when you're there at a reunion, there's tours. Some people do their own tours to save money. Other times there might be stuff that we couldn't see on the tour, like the battery. They didn't do a tour of, I don't think. So I went with some friends and we toured it on our own, and I went back a second time. So it is a beautiful memorial from every angle. On every side of this memorial, they have writing on it that talks about the dead of Charleston, the cause for which they fought, and it talks about the memory and how important that is. And I love the gentleman with the shield, that kind of gladiator, kind of Grecian-inspired art that they have there. Definitely a very unique memorial. And I want to thank these wonderful UDC ladies, my friend. So that was my one friend, Miss Cindy, on the right. And during the event, she did a wonderful tea. And while she was doing the tea, we played some games. So it was kind of cool because back in the Victorian era, they would do parlor games. And parlor games were, little games that were fun. They could be paper, games, kind of like crossword puzzles. And it was a way for, people to get together and to, just enjoy each other's company. And there really wasn't any kind of contest in it. It was just about, enjoying fun and all that. So we had a really good time at the tea, and we had peach tea, which is really delicious. Charleston is a huge producer of tea, and people don't know that. So, some of their cash crops and their plantations involved sugarcane and rice and all that. Well, tea was a very big plant. And I think the big takeaway from that program that I didn't really know much about was that essentially most of the tea that we get comes from the same plant, a tea plant. And it was really interesting to learn that like green tea is kind of when the plant is, in the middle of its life cycle. White tea is when the new buds come up. And then your black tea is a little bit more aged and a little bit more mature and dried and fermented. So it was neat to learn about the types of tea and the types of fashion that ladies wore at that time. So they had about 4 or 5 living models where they, dressed up in the antebellum wear. And it was just such a wonderful experience to see the different clothing styles. And I know that, some of those hoop skirts, there's a lot of just wonderful history in that fashion. And that's something that, again, often doesn't get talked about when studying history. And let me go to the next one. These are 2 of my wonderful buddies. We had a great time at the convention center because what they did during the convention center is you had an entire strip. It was huge. And here's the other cool thing. When they had us at this convention hall, there was a dance competition and then a sports competition going on at the convention center. So we had like half the building. So we actually had a lot of young people with their parents that were touring and visiting us and, going to the different booths, wanting to know more, wanting to know a lot more about, our history, our heritage, and all that. And it was really cool to, all these just children, their eyes lit up when we gave them their first Confederate flag. They were cheering on. We had families that bought like several flags. There were some Southern families who knew the history. There were other families who didn't really know much about it, wanted to know more. And it really showed that, it's so impressive to know that people still care about our history that may not have connection to it, that maybe just appreciate American history or Southern history or even South Carolinian history. So that was pretty cool to witness that and to be able to be a part of that. And if I actually back up quick, I think I forgot. No, I didn't forget one slide. 1 second, y'all. And right here, I figured there's the slide I was looking for. That right there is a very famous lady from the war between the states. She is why the South won First and Second Manassas. That is Mrs. Rose Greenhow. So Mrs. Rose Greenhow was America's first female diplomat. She was also Catholic. She was a proud Southerner. She was from Maryland. She had that Revolutionary War blood in her veins, and she knew that coming from a Rev War family, this was our second revolution. So what she did was she was able to send coded messages to the South while behind enemy lines while she was living in Washington, D.C. So she was really methodical. She knew how to use her power at the time, use her social circles. And it was pretty cool when, you know, this was a war and the South had minimal casualties because of her efforts. The Yankees got beat pretty hard in First and Second Manassas and ran back. And because of her efforts, it led to Confederate victory. Jefferson Davis, the president, gave her credit as well as Beauregard. So what ended up happening is during the war, she was getting watched by Alan Pinkerton. He was an atheist. He had some ties to socialism, and his security company is still around today. So Alan Pinkerton attempted to get her arrested. They didn't have proof. And when Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, it made it easier. So then she was arrested, essentially without charge. She was smart enough to know what was going on, and she was able to destroy her secrets, hide her Codex, and do all of that. So the Yankees never found it. And they didn't even know what she did until after she was released. So Lincoln had Rose Greenhow and her 8-year-old daughter at the time locked up in prison at the old Capitol Prison, which is now the site of today's Supreme Court. So while she was at Old Capitol Prison with her daughter, she continued to fight for her freedom, and it led to her finally getting freed and deported to Richmond with her daughter, Rosie, and they escaped. So while they escaped, rather deported, she went on a ship and she went to France and then England as a way to, be a diplomat, plead for the Southern cause, to get support. And she was very effective at what she did. And she was transporting gold on the way back from England. And what happened was there was reports that the Confederate ship was coming back, so they were able to outrun a blockade runner. So at that point, they're near Cape Fear, North Carolina, and off the coast, they are waiting there on the ship. And Rose was not about to, get recaptured. She knew what it was like. And she demanded that they take rowboats and they get her to shore. So when they did that, they put the boat down. No sooner does the boat go on there, the boat ends up capsizing. And, it was interesting. There's some of these claims that she might have died from the gold. Well, they know the gold weighed about 6 pounds. That's how much she was carrying. But when you take into account the fact that, the clothing for women at the time was very heavy. I mean, compared to gentlemen, where gentlemen had like maybe 2 or 3 layers, women had multiple. They had the long skirts, they had the petticoats, they had all this weight. That fabric is an absolute nightmare to, work with when you're, swimming. So you can't really swim in it. It led to her drowning. She was given a full military honors burial. She is still regarded as a heroine of the South, a patriot, and a vital member of the Confederacy to this day. Her grave is immaculate. Every year there are multiple memorial services at it that are conducted by the OCR, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and the Sons of Confederate Veterans. So really is a beautiful sight to see. And the fun part about that is today, her grave is still, heavily visited and respected. And, the OCR, the Order of Confederate Rose, which is the auxiliary group to the Sons of Confederate Veterans, is named in her honor. So her memory stays alive with that organization. Their goal is to assist the Sons of Confederate Veterans with all of their events and memorials, and they actually helped raise a memorial to honor the OCR. So I thought that was pretty darn cool. And Also realized I forgot to give credit to my friend. That's my buddy, Miss Carolyn, on my left, and that's my buddy, Miss Cindy, on my left. Both of them are members of the wonderful C. Irvine Walker chapter of the UDC. They had a beautiful UDC, store and little shop. So what I did was I supported all of the UDC chapters that were there, as well as the Children of the Confederacy shop. They were selling items, so I purchased a wonderful Confederate rose cockade and these beautiful pens. I mean, how beautiful is that, y'all? So I've been bringing this to work. If I have to either sign documents or write my reports, I'm going to take a little bit of Dixie with me. Cotton is just such a beautiful plant. Got a lot of beautiful history behind it. And look at just how cool that is, y'all. So I really love the craft set. My friend's UDC chapter did, and they sold quite a bit of items that were going to go help their scholarship fund. And right here, that's my buddy on the right, Mr. Brian, who comes to view the show sometimes. And my friend, obviously, Mr. John on the left, who is from Michigan. What are the chances, y'all, that Michigan has both a Sons of Confederate Veterans camp and a UDC chapter in Detroit? I thought that was the coolest thing ever, y'all. And that was Mrs. Rose Greenhow doing her presentation on her imprisonment. And Rose Greenhow, she actually wrote a book. So at the time of the war between the states, she wrote a book. And Rose Greenhow was very educated. You know, she was sent to one of the best private schools. And, you know, she got some of her education more or less in D.C. So it was a boarding house, but she was able to get educated just by being in that area at a time when women were not educated at all. So, you know, her schooling, for lack of a better word, was through experience, through reading, through writing, possibly tutors. She got a chance to meet John C. Calhoun and James Buchanan, some of the, you know, really good early government officials that we had for our country. So she got to learn a lot of their values on statesmanship and all that. And on the right is the wonderful snack table that was put out for us by the museum at Market Hall. Had a wonderful bakery make these cookies. We had the South Carolina flag, the secession flag down below, cheese sticks. There was some sweet tea out there. It was a really nice setup. And on the right here, my friend, Miss Jill, who curates and runs that museum. She does a fantastic job. They also have a genealogy library. So for those that want to learn about their family history, that museum right there in Charleston, South Carolina is a great resource. They have just about every single Confederate regiment if anybody needs help finding an ancestor. And I figured I'd also mention on the left, one of my favorite SCV camps from Florida is the Judah P. Benjamin camp. This is a fantastic Florida Sons of Confederate Veterans camp. They work with a lot of amazing projects around Florida. And on top of that, they helped to do an amazing flyover with Save Southern Heritage Florida several years ago, and it was fantastic. And of course, my buddy Georgia Jude. We had a great time going to reunion. When we first met up, we met each other downtown. So Jude and I usually go to reunions early to do some sightseeing and maybe network with some people. We also got a chance to meet some of the Arizona Sons of Confederate Veterans. Chat with them. They were pretty darn cool gentlemen to hang out with. It was a wonderful time, a great experience, and I'm really excited because next year we're having the Sons of Confederate Veterans reunion in Houston, Texas. So it'll be a great time, a great experience, and more historical adventures to come, y'all. You know, it seems like these Confederate movements are growing, and it seems like after the mostly peaceful riots of 2020, calling them what they are, it really put a much-needed fire under people that we've got to take a stand for our history, we've got to take back education, and we have got to fight against CRT. That is the only way we're going to take our country back and bring it to where we need to go today. I just love how we have a hater in here, y'all. And it's funny as heck because let's just give our hater a round of applause because every time he runs his mouth, we actually go up in views. So now we're at twice the amount of views on our X account and on Facebook as well. That's awesome. And we occupy rent in his head. spaces in his head rent free. Pretty darn cool. And CRT is absolutely taught in school because, CRT is one of those theories where they tell you. I know being a PhD, major for clinical psychology, they tell us about CRT, that it is real. And we have professors that are telling us, oh, implement this DEI CRT trainings in your things. And that's more or less what's going on. But we're putting a stop to that. And that is what I'm really happy to see, is people are actually fighting against all this. And I seriously doubt that you're a history teacher. I really, really doubt it. All right, y'all. So with that being said, it was a great little program to do this and, to spend some time with y'all on my Thursday. I'll be back on Monday. Hopefully we're going to have a panel discussion at that time. We have a fantastic event coming up in Delaware, the Southern Rock Woodstock. And this is a wonderful Southern culture, band, and they have a series of other bands playing. We're going to be selling a ton of Confederate-related items that will go to support the beautiful Confederate monument in Delaware, which is still standing. It's fantastic. They have a beautiful flag that is part of their memorial, and all the funds that day are going to go to the upkeep of that memorial, which is it's in pristine condition. So come on down to Delaware, and if anyone's around, look up Southern Rock Woodstock. We sell a ton of Confederate merchandise. We put up our booth early in the morning. By the end of the night, we have everybody in that audience waving Confederate flags. It is a beautiful sight to see. They are also having another show after Delaware in Ohio, which I thought was pretty cool. And that is pretty much about that for this episode. Funny thing, to our hater, Steve, the memorial in Delaware is not going nowhere. They actually can't touch the memorial. The memorial is at a museum. It's on private property, and you could see the flag from the road. And that's why everybody loves it. People honk. People come from all over to see that monument. It's a beautiful monument that honors the Southern Patriots of Delaware. And it doesn't only honor just the soldiers. It honors the civilians. There's a lot of civilians in Delaware who were harassed by federal troops, attacked, illegally arrested by Lincoln. So they have a lot of cool stories to tell at that museum. So it's kind of funny, y'all, how when this nonsense started happening with the cancel culture, they said, oh, wait a minute, put the monuments in museums. Well, this monument and flag is at a museum, but apparently that's not good enough for those that want to promote CRT and Marxism. So the monument's not going anywhere. They can't touch it. It's there to stay. It's a beautiful memorial. And the town of Delaware stands by their heritage and history. So more monuments are going up because of Monuments Across Dixie. I am super proud to be part of that movement. I'm glad to know that I have been on the right side of history by putting more memorials up. And as of now, more memorials have gone up than came down. And we've also supported projects that put up mega Confederate flags for everybody to see on the highway. Taking Route 95 to South Carolina, I saw 2 giant Confederate flags in Virginia, and I saw 1 giant Confederate flag in North Carolina. And it lets everybody know that, guess what? Our state is a proud, conservative, Christian Confederate state. So that's the benefit. And it's really hilarious that people go crazy on X over the flags on the highway. And, their memorial flags, they have plaques with our history and all that at the base of them. So people come from all over to see the flag, take photos with it, and it's pretty darn cool. All right, y'all. So please share this video when it is over. It was great seeing all of y'all. Y'all have a fantastic Thursday night. Y'all stay Southern, and Deo Bendice.